Hello, and welcome to a Pokemon XD Gale Darkness video, where today we're going to use the two Pseudo Legendaries of Gen 3, Metagross and Salamence, to beat the game. Now, we are going to start as Beldum and Bagon? I actually don't know how to pronounce that, but it doesn't really matter. And I do think that these two could do very well, but because they're both in the slow level up group, it's going to take a long time before they can get to that point. On top of that, they both have issues early on that we'll get to in just a moment. But I do think that these two Pseudo Legendaries should do very well once they're fully evolved. And would you look at that, a battle against Metagross and Salamence, and that's how you start the game. Now, in this case, I actually decide to do the battle with Earthquake. What I usually do is I hit give up down in the bottom corner, and you could just skip this fight altogether. But I don't actually start the timer until right after this battle, so it doesn't really matter. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to their stats and move pools. Bagon has 45 HP, 75 attack, 60 defense, 40 special attack, 30 special defense, and 50 speed. And while it does get access to all these moves eventually, Bagon does not have a lot of these moves. So unfortunately it is mostly stuck with dark and normal type moves for the moment, which isn't great, but it will do well for the beginning of the game. Then moving over to Beldum, it has 40 HP, 55 attack, 80 defense, 35 special attack, 60 special defense, and 30 speed. And while it will eventually have this great coverage of fire, psychic, ground, ghost, fighting, and steel type moves, unfortunately right now it only gets takedown. And when I say it only gets takedown, I mean it doesn't learn any TMs or tutor moves until it evolves into Metang, so it will only have takedown. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to our Beldum in particular, which has a jolly nature, raising its speed but lowering its special attack. Not the greatest nature for it, however, it only has 30 base speed, so that will help in the early game quite a bit. And Metagross also isn't all that fast either, so it could be helpful for outspeeding a few Pokemon later on. It gets access to the Clear Body ability, which prevents my stats from being reduced from things like Intimidate or Sand Attack, and of course, it only gets Takedown. Now moving on to our Bagon, it has a Bashful nature, which is unfortunately a neutral nature, but that's alright. It gets the Rocket ability, preventing all recoil damage, and it gets Rage Leer and Bite by level 10. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to our first battle, and I've decided to show off the battle against the Old Man because really our Pokemon are very weak, and this is a good way to tell just how good they're going to do, at least early on. And of course, I want to get them evolved as quick as possible. This might be one of the few fights that we actually see the two pre-evolutions together. So anyway, after 2 bites, we're able to take down the Abra. Of course, Horsey is very defensive, so I'm going to use Bite on it, doing quite a bit of damage. I go for takedown, finishing it off, and then all that's left is the Shroomish, which unfortunately I am going to risk being effect spored every single time I attack, because I make contact with all my moves, but it doesn't really matter for this fight. And I take down the Shroomish, and we beat the Old Man. So right away, I'm going to go to Mount Battle to do some extra training before going to the Power Rangers. I decided to fight Brown today, and that's because I have Bite to deal super effective damage against the Baltoy. So I go for it, and that is doing a pitiful amount of damage. Anyway, I guess I'll go ahead and start just a little bit of rambling. If you are enjoying this video so far, consider liking, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Now first, I'd just like to say thank you for all the feedback on the previous video about how I should adjust these videos. Honestly, it seems like most people are okay with how it is, with a few minor tweaks, one of which I'll get to near the end of this video. But I'd just like to say thanks for the responses. Anyway, now with Brown defeated, I decided to do just a little bit of training to get Bagon up to level 17, where it learns Headbutt. In the Cypher base, I run into another Bagon. Hello, other Bagon. Goodbye, other Bagon. And then I catch the Scarvana for the Black Glasses items to raise the power of Bite. And then at level 20, Beldum evolves into Metang. And with that, it now has access to all of its TM and tutor moves, as well as just having solid stats. Now at the same time, Metang learns Confusion and Metal Claw. So let's go ahead and see the new stats. It has 60 HP, 75 attack, 100 defense, 55 special attack, 80 special defense, and 50 speed. So unfortunately it is the same speed tier as Bagon, however because it has a jolly nature it should outspeed naturally. and with 100 defense it should be surviving attacks quite a lot better. Unfortunately, with only 75 attack and 55 special attack, it's not hitting that hard, but the improvements are definitely nice for this point in the game, so let's go ahead and move on to another Beldum. Hello other Beldum, goodbye other Beldum, and then two Livrinash leads with a Beautifly and a Love Disc. And I go for Headbutt and Metal Claw into the Love Disc immediately, which I'm realizing now Metal Claw was definitely the wrong choice because water types do resist it. However, it missed anyway, so it doesn't really matter. At least it wouldn't have if I didn't decide to select the same move again, only to realize that it's not very effective, despite the fact that I should have already known that, but doesn't really matter. It takes down the Love Disc, and then out comes Roselia. I go for Headbutt and Confusion, hoping to take it down in a single turn. And while I would have liked to outspeed it, it's unfortunately faster than me and survives both attacks, so it's able to set up the Leech Seed and survive till the next turn. However, this does also give me the opportunity to hit the Delcatty for free, which could swing the battle back in our favor. Hopefully, she sends out the Shadow Delcatty, and Headbutt does very little to it. Okay, never mind. Metang is taken down to 10 HP, and a Shadow Rush finishes it off, just leaving the Bagon. Go for Headbutt once again. But unfortunately, because I don't outspeed it or do enough damage, I'm taken down. So I go into it once again and lose before deciding to go over to Mount Battle just to do a little bit of training. Because the second attempt actually went pretty well, I got down to the final Pokemon, but I just wasn't strong enough to survive that many attacks. So now on the third attempt, I go back in, and the thing is that neither of her lead Pokemon are too threatening to me. Now the Love Disc did get a crit, which is very unfortunate, but it doesn't really matter. Anyway, I'm able to take down the Beautifly on the second turn, which leaves Bagon to attack the Roselia right away, which does take it down below half health. And now that I'm at a higher level, Metang actually outspeeds Roselia, so I'm able to finish it off with a Confusion, which brings out her final Pokemon once again, the Shadow Delcatty. And I go for Headbutt into it, still not doing that much damage, but it is still respectable, at least for it being a first stage Pokemon. Metang actually survive a Shadow Rush fairly well. Headbutt nearly finishes off Delcatty, which is very unfortunate. Water Gun takes Metang down to 1 HP. Shadow Rush into Bagon, it survives. Go for Confusion to finish off Delcatty. And then all that's left is the Love Disc, which nearly goes down to a Headbutt, which is a bit unfortunate because now Metang goes down, but I guess Bagon does get all the experience from it. So you can't have a Pokemon XD Gildarts video without the obligatory Mirror B, of course. So hello Mirror B. Goodbye, Mirror B. Anyway, at level 25, Bagon gets Ember, which isn't a great move, but it is better than Rage, and I pick up the Ralts here for the Twisted Spoon item to raise my Psychic type damage by 10% before going to the Real Gam Tower to go pick up my two favorite TMs, Hidden Power and Protect, and I'm going to teach them to both of them right away. And Bagon has Hidden Power Electric, which is an okay Hidden Power type for it. It's not really that much of a special attacker. However, once it becomes Salamence, I could see using it maybe in the final fight. And Metang has Hidden Power Fighting, which does help against other steel types, but not really much else for it. So anyway, soon after, Bagon evolves into Shelgon, which is going to be a much needed upgrade because Bagon was feeling extremely weak at this point in the game. And it also has the option to learn Protect, which I decide not to do for right now. Anyway, Shelgon has 65 HP, 95 attack, 100 defense, 60 special attack, 50 special defense, and 50 speed. So it is a fairly strong attacker with good defense. Unfortunately, with a low HP stat, it's not able to make the most use out of it. And with only 50 special defense, it is going to be very weak against special attacks. Now, luckily, the Dragon type does help with that quite a bit, resisting fire, water, electric, and grass. But it might still struggle. Anyway, moving on to the battle against Snaddle, he leads with a Quagsire and a Lantern. I go for Headbutt and Takedown into the Quagsire, and while the Takedown isn't doing much, Headbutt is actually doing quite a bit of damage now. Unfortunately, still not half. Ice Punch takes Shelgon down to 25 HP, which I'm a bit surprised it's going for Ice Punch this early on in the battle. Out comes Lunatone, his first Shadow Pokemon. Go for Bite into it, not really doing that much damage, especially a lot less than I expected. Go for another Bite and Metal Claw. Shelgon goes down to a Shadow Wave. Metang gets taken down pretty low, but the level up does raise my health just a tad. Out comes Cast Form, another Shockwave taking me down to 6 HP, and then I go for Hidden Power, which, while doing a decent amount to Cast Form, isn't enough to take it down, and I lose my first attempt. So I decide to go back over to the tutor lady to go pick up Body Slam, and I'm going to teach that over Takedown. It does less damage, but it's not going to be damaging me. So I think it's going to be a better trade-off, and it has the chance to paralyze as well. Go for Body Slam into Quagsire, and Headbutt, which actually is doing about the same amount of damage as before, though that might just be because this is the third attempt, and I've gone up a couple levels since the first attempt. But anyway, out comes the Nortone once again, go for Bite into it, which still isn't doing that much damage. Go for another Headbutt and Metal Claw. Metal Claw takes it down in a single hit. Out comes Cast Form. Headbutt into it. Doesn't quite do half. Now Metang is actually handling these shockwaves very well, so I'm not sure how much of a threat Lantern really is anymore. I'm able to take down the Cast Form from above half health now with those extra levels. And then out comes his strongest Pokemon, which is Metang in this case, because it completely resists my Metang, other than the hidden power fighting, which I luckily got. And Bite really doesn't do that much damage to it, but luckily I got a crit which is able to take it down, and then all that's left is the Lantern, which Body Slam takes it down to half, paralyzes it, and a Headbutt nearly finishes it off. Unfortunately I don't get the paralysis, but it doesn't matter, and I take down Snaddle on the third attempt. On the SS Libra I pick up the TM for Flamethrower, which I teach over Ember, and then at level 38 Shelgon gets the move Dragon Breath, which is its best stab option, and it also has a decent chance to paralyze. And also at the Snag'em base I get the TM for Psychic, which I teach over Confusion before going into the battle against Gonzap. He leads with a Nuzleaf and Electrode, and on the first turn the Nuzleaf is going to go for Fake Out. It just is random who it decides to pick, and unfortunately Electrode decided to use Spark into Metang. I would have rather he used Sonic Boom into Shelgon. And unfortunately Metang did get paralyzed. I go for Flamethrower into Electrode, taking it down to red health, and Psychic finishes it off. And luckily it got burned, so even if Metang wasn't able to act that turn, it still would have gone down. Anyway, out comes Vileplume. It is weak to both Flamethrower and Psychic, so it should go down to either one of those. I decide to use Flamethrower into the Nuzleaf to take it down. Vileplume is of course faster than Metang because of the paralysis, and unfortunately Metang is paralyzed that turn. I go for Dragon Breath into the Whiscash, hoping for a paralysis on it, but it doesn't get it, and doesn't really do that much damage either. Psychic doesn't take down Vileplume in a single hit, which is very unfortunate, so I decide to go for Flamethrower to finish it off. Then that brings out his final Pokemon, which is Skarmory. A Rock Tomb slows Shelgon down, possibly slower than the other two Pokemon now. Psychic really isn't doing that much damage to Whiscash. I go for Flamethrower into Skarmory because it is very weak on the special side, and Metang nearly goes down to a crit Water Pulse. Surprisingly, Skarmory actually survives, but Whiscash does not survive the Body Slam, and Skarmory is stuck recharging, so I'm able to finish off with one last Flamethrower and beat Gonzap first attempt. Moving on to Gorgon, he leads with a Lairon and a Celio, and I double into the Celio because I know the Lairon is going to protect right away. Unfortunately, the combined efforts of both of us is not enough to take it down. And in hindsight, Hidden Power probably would have been a better move to use against Celio anyway, which might have guaranteed the one-shot. Go for Hidden Power into Lairon because it is 4 times weak to it, takes it down to half health. Then out comes the Slowking. I go for Bite and Body Slam into it, which takes it down to about a third of its health. It hits an Earthquake, dealing quite a bit of damage to Metang, but not too much to Shelgon. I go for another Bite into it, finishing it off, and then out comes Ursaring. And then I go for Hidden Power to take down the Lairon, bringing out his first Shadow Pokemon, which is a Shadow Primeape. And while Shadow Primeape might be a threat, I think Metang and Shelgon are strong enough to take it down with a Psychic and a Headbutt. And Headbutt does much more damage than I expected. Psychic of course finishes it off. And then out comes his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Hypno. Ursaring hits an Earthquake, dealing a huge amount of damage, actually taking Metang down. And while I am able to take down the Hypno, I'm taken down to 7 HP, and unless I get a flinch here, which I do, but it's going to be a 3-shot, so do I do Headbutt for the 30%, or do I hit it with Flamethrower to hit its lower special defense stat? Unfortunately, it's not enough to take it down, but had I gotten that burn and had a little bit more HP, there's a good chance I could have survived the slash had it not crit. But anyway, now on to the second attempt, and while the Lairon is still a threat with Earthquake, it doesn't deal nearly as much damage as Ursaring did, so I can easily take down the Slowking, Ursaring, and Primeape, which finally brings me to his final Pokemon once again, the Shadow Hypno, and of course because it is just going for Earthquake every turn, it is going to be dealing damage to its own Pokemon as well, so I am able to take down the Hypno, and then all that's left is the Lairon, which going for Flamethrower takes it down below half health. Iron Tail is doing quite a bit of damage, especially with the defense drop, but it's not enough, and I take it down. Anyway, now moving on to the final area of the game, and these two are doing alright, but don't count them out just yet, because if they can get through the last area of the game quickly, they could do very well. Anyway, right away, Shelgon evolves into Salamence, which is going to be a huge increase in power, because it has 95 HP, 135 attack, 80 defense, 110 special attack, 80 special defense, and 100 speed, making it incredibly fast, incredibly strong on both the physical and special sides, and it also has decent bulk as well as 95 HP, making it quite tanky. Now, it does gain the flying typing, which does make it immune to ground type moves. However, it does make it quadruple weak to ice, which could be a problem in the near future. However, to compensate, it does get the Intimidate ability, which lowers both opponents' attack stat whenever it switches in, which could be very nice, especially for the upcoming fights. But with that, now that I have a flying type, I decide to teach Metang Earthquake before moving on to the battle against Lavrina. She leads with a Gardevoir and a Gorbis. I send out Salamence and Metang. Intimidate lowers their attack, which doesn't really matter for these two because they're both special attackers. And then I go for Dragon Breath into Gorbis, not enough to take it down. Thunder Punch does a decent amount of damage to Metang. I go for Earthquake, finishing off the Gorbis. And dealing quite a bit of damage to Gardevoir, I go for Headbutt into the Gardevoir to finish that off, and Flamethrower to take down the Roselia before it sets up Leech Seed or tries to attract. And then out comes her first Shadow Pokemon, which is a Shadow Farfetch'd. And then once the Gardevoir goes down, she sends out her second Shadow Pokemon, which is a Shadow Altaria. Now, while I do want to get rid of the Farfetch'd as soon as possible, I do also think I can take down Altaria in a single hit, which I do with Dragon Breath, and Body Slam only does half to Farfetch, so it's able to set up Shadow Panic, but luckily Salamence actually avoids it and is able to take it down, and we beat Lavrina on the first attempt. And finally, we evolve Metang into Metagross, which is going to be a huge upgrade for it as well. Metagross has 80 HP, 135 attack, 130 defense, 95 special attack, 90 special defense, and 70 speed. So it hits a lot harder now and will survive physical attacks a lot better, and its special stats are quite respectable. The only thing is that with that 70 speed, it might not be able to get the jump on the threats I need it to, despite being a little over leveled for this point of the game. But hopefully that jolly nature will come in handy, despite it lowering my special attack a bit. Anyway, in the volcano, I run into another Metang. Hello, other Metang. Goodbye, other Metang. And at the top of the volcano, I run into Snaddle, where he leads with a Quagsire and a Metang this time. So I go for Body Slam into the Quagsire and Headbutt to hopefully finish it off in a single turn, which I do. Then out comes Scizor. Metang uses Thunder Punch, really not doing that much to Metagross. However, if it did get paralyzed, that could be an issue. I go for Flamethrower to take down the Scizor, and then out comes his Shadow Soul Rock. Now, it's always going to set up Shadow Sky on the first turn, so I decide to go for Hidden Power Fighting into it, which doesn't really do that much damage. Then I decide to go for Bite, which nearly takes it down. Hidden Power does finish it off, and then out comes his next Pokemon, which is Castform. And Metang's Ice Punches are actually doing quite a bit to Salamence, so I'm going to go for Earthquake here to take it down. Headbutt just guarantees that Castform goes down to the Earthquake as well. So both go down, and then out comes his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Starmie. And this Shadow Starmie is always a bit of a threat, but luckily Salamence does outspeed, gets the flinch, and Body Slam finishes it off. So a pretty easy Snaddle. We move on to Ardos. He leads with a Shadow Swallow and Alakazam, and both of his Pokemon are extremely fast, so I know I won't be able to get the jump on him with Metagross. So Salamence will have to do, and unfortunately it's not enough to take out Swallow in a single turn, nor does it get the flinch with Headbutt, but I do take down the Alakazam with Earthquake. And then out comes the Kingdra. I go for a Headbutt to finish off Swallow, then out comes the Heracross. I go for Earthquake once again, which doesn't take down Kingdra. It hits an Ice Beam into Salamence, taking it down. Fruity Pebbles rain down, dealing a little bit of chip damage. Go for Psychic to take down the Heracross, then out comes Electabuzz, which will absolutely outspeed me. Kingdra hits a Hydro Pump, dealing quite a bit of damage to me. But I think I'm still strong enough to survive an attack from Electabuzz, unless it gets a crit. Okay, never mind. I decide to go back to the Tutor Lady to go pick up Double Edge for Salamence. Even though it doesn't have the Rockhead ability anymore, it will still do much more than Headbutt will. And I've decided to take down the Alakazam right away instead, and that's because Swallow should just go for Shadow Sky, unless it decides to go for Shadow Half, which is just very unfortunate. I go for Body Slam, which takes down Kingdra, then out comes Heracross. I go for Flamethrower into it, taking it down in a single hit, and then I go for Earthquake to take down the Electabuzz. And so, despite not having a great start, it did work out for the better because Swallow is now going to be paired up with Snorlax, so it won't be attacking anymore. Instead, it'll just use Shadow Mist to lower my evasion. Go for Double Edge, which takes Snorlax down to half health. And then I go for Hidden Power, which doesn't quite take it down, so Salamence goes down. But I will be able to take it down on the following turn. Unfortunately, Swallow actually sets up Shadow Sky, which I don't think should matter. However, if it did crit with Shadow Break, it could take me down, which it does go for Shadow Break. Takes me down to half of my remaining health before I finish it off with Body Slam. Now moving on to Gorgon, he leads with a Slowking and an Ursaring, and on the first turn the Ursaring is going to go for Protect. So I decide to go unless it doesn't. Okay, never mind. I go for Dragon Breath and Earthquake, which takes down the Slowking and does quite a bit of damage to Ursaring before it fires back with another Earthquake of its own. I then go for Flamethrower and another Earthquake, which takes down the Aggron, bringing out his Walrein. And because the Walrein does have Ice Beam, I want to take it down as quick as possible, so I go for Double Edge, taking it down very low before finishing it off with Earthquake. Now with both of his Pokemon down, he has his final two Pokemon, his Shadow Poliwrath and his Shadow Mr. Mime. Both are quite strong, but the Poliwrath is going to set up Shadow Sky on the first turn, so it's not a threat right away, and Mr. Mime is frail enough to go down to a single Double Edge. So, an easy first try Gorgon. Moving on to Eldis, he leads with a Shadow Manectric and a Ninjask. And while I could just take the Manectric down with Earthquake, Salamence really has nothing to do this turn either, so I decided to just double into it. Maybe I can take it down in a single hit. But Flamethrower only does half, so Psychic finishes it off, and then out comes Salamence. Now, it is very threatening because the Fruity Pebbles are up, so it is going to be doing 50% more damage with its Shadow move, so I really hope that it decides to just go for Shadow Hold like it does, so it doesn't do any damage to me. I go for Dragon Breath, which takes it down to very low, Psychic finishes it off, then out comes Flygon. And luckily the Ninjask is just going for Dig Protect, so it's not going to be doing that much this fight, and it's not really doing that much damage either. I go for Dragon Breath, which does take down Flygon in a single hit, and then out comes Marowak. And while it is always quite a threat, Psychic does take it down well below half, so I will be able to take it down quickly. I go for Dragon Breath into it, and then I'm going to go for Hidden Power into the next Pokemon, which is a Shadow Lapras. Now hopefully Hidden Power fighting does quite a bit of damage to it, and it actually takes it down to half health. Now I'm not sure if this is going to be a range or not to take it down, but I'm going to hope it isn't, to go for Flamethrower to take down Ninjask, and Hidden Power takes it down. Okay, with that we beat Eldis, and now we move on to the big box legendary Shalologia. And while Salamence will be able to outspeed, Metagross might get outsped by it. So I go for Bite, hoping for a flinch. I don't get it, it just uses Shadow Down though. So I go for Body Slam, taking it down to low yellow, and Bite finishes it off. Oh, never mind. It gets one good shot in before going down. Okay, well it was good seeing you, Lugia. Anyway, now we move on to the final battle against Greevil. He leads with a Moltres and a Rhydon. And I'm going to go for Double Edge and Body Slam into Moltres immediately, which gets a crit, taking it down. However, Salamence just took a ton of damage because of it. Go for Body Slam into the Executor, also getting a crit, nearly taking it down in a single hit. Okay, well, since this is more or less just a test battle, let's see how much Bite does to Rhydon, which it nearly takes it down. Go for Earthquake to take them both down, then out comes Tauros, and then out comes Articuno. Now, Articuno is the bigger threat between these two, because Tauros is just going to set up Shadow Sky on this first turn, so I go for Flamethrower into it, not quite dealing half, and then Body Slam nearly takes it down, but it's not quite enough. It hits a Shadow Chill on Metagross, taking it down to half health, and so I know I outspeed it with a Salamence, so I can take it down, and then I decide to go for Body Slam into the incoming Zapdos, and I think if this is a two-shot, I win, possibly? Go for Body Slam, and it doesn't quite do half. Okay, well that's a bit unfortunate. Salamence might be able to pull through with a Double Edge. Not quite. It survives on just a little bit of health left. hits a Shadow Bolt, taking down Metagross, and that was a very close first attempt, so let's go in once again. I think we can do this on an easy second attempt. No rare candies needed. Go for Double Edge. Unfortunately, no crit this time, so it does survive, and Psychic doesn't quite take down Rhydon, and Salamence goes down right away. Okay, never mind. Apparently I needed some pretty decent luck because I only make it to Exeggutor and Tauros on the second attempt. Now at level 55, Metagross gets its signature move, Meteor Mash, which is a 100 base power Steel-type move with 85% accuracy, and honestly, I think this might just smash right through Articuno, so I'm going to teach it and go back into the battle for the third attempt. Now, of course, I do need a little bit of luck at the beginning, because if Salamence goes down immediately, it's basically over. I go for Double Edge and Body Slam, which with a few more levels still isn't enough to take it down. I used up all my rare candies, so I don't really get much higher than this without some serious grinding, so I decide to go for Dragon Breath to finish off the Moltres, and then out comes Exeggutor once again, and then I go for Earthquake, which should take down the Rhydon. It doesn't. It uses Shadow down, so now my defense is lowered. Luckily, that doesn't really matter too much, except for Tauros, because it's the only thing that will actually attack me on the physical side from here on out, once these other two go down. And I'm able to take down the Rhydon, and I get a crit on Tauros, taking it down, bringing out both legendary birds at the same time. Okay, this is either a blessing or a curse, because either I'm going to get taken down immediately, or I'm able to one-shot Articuno, which we'll have to see. Meteor Mash actually hits, and it takes it down. I get an attack boost, which is incredibly helpful, and I go for Body Slam because of it. Double Edge takes it down to half. It's a Shadow Rush finishing off Salamence, but Body Slam finishes the job and we beat Greevil. So with that, how well did these two do? Well, they beat the game at a time of 10 hours, 58 minutes, and 20 seconds. Salamence at level 57 and Metagross at level 55, with 14 losses throughout the game. So while I do think that this pairing is really good, unfortunately, it does have a few flaws, the biggest of which is the fact that they just level up slowly, which also affects the second issue, is that their stats, until they're fully evolved, just aren't that great. Like, they just feel very weak, especially as you get further into the game, and unfortunately they have to keep fighting stronger and stronger opponents to get those higher levels efficiently. So it's this weird limbo where they're not quite strong enough to deal with the stronger threats, but to go back and do extra training with weaker things, which will slow you down. Anyway, despite that, they find themselves in the B+ tier, and this is one of the things I wanted to note, is that I think from here on out, I'm actually going to put like some sort of signifier of where the Pokemon are, because now that we're nearing 100 Pokemon on this tier list, I've been told it can actually get kind of hard to tell which Pokemon is the new one on the list. But anyway, let me know if the brackets with the highlights are a good change, or if it stood out a little better to you. But anyway, I do think that while these Pokemon are good, they have quite a few flaws, especially through most of the game up until the very end, and even in the end game, because their levels were fairly close to the Pokemon they were fighting, they still felt kind of weak, despite doing very good damage for the levels that they were. But anyway, if you did enjoy this video, consider liking and subscribing. If you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and bye!